For nearly 3 decades, The Undertaker has cast an enormous shadow over the WWE landscape, presiding at different times as it's Frankenstein's monster, it's Batman, it's Satan incarnate, and it's Clint Eastwood, and sometimes a combination of those 4. No professional wrestler in history has ever had such a continuous presence in McMahon-centric sports entertainment quite like the ever-present Phenom. Nor will any other wrestler likely match up to his awe-inspiring longevity. In this brand new Cultaholic installment, we'll be taking a look back at the lengthy career of one of professional wrestling's most famed and accomplished icons. And with WrestleMania on the horizon, who better to begin with than the man behind the streak and the most indomitable performer of all time, The Undertaker. Before donning the black duster and brimmed hat, Mark Calaway had humbler beginnings in the sport, starting his wrestling career in 1984. A former college basketball center at Texas Wesleyan University in the mid-80s, Calaway dropped out to pursue wrestling with more regularity. A protege of gifted heavyweight Don the Spoiler Jardine, Calaway would adopt one of Jardine's signatures, the rope walk, or old school as we would later know it, into his wrestling repertoire. Throughout much of the late 80s, Calaway plied his trade under such names as the Master of Pain and Texas Red, in places like Jerry Lawler's USWA and the Von Erich's World Class promotion. As the 80s drew to a close, Calaway would gain national clearance in WCW, adopting the name Mean Mark Callis. As Callis, Calaway replaced an injured Sid Vicious in the tag team The Skyscrapers, teaming with fellow menacing giant Dangerous Dan Spivey. Mean Mark Callis and Dangerous Dan Spivey, how very golden age of wrestling. The Skyscrapers team was relatively short-lived, and after a tour of New Japan in March 1990, where he performed under the name Punisher Dice Morgan, Callis returned to WCW as a singles performer. He would have some high-profile matches with the likes of Brian Pillman, Johnny Ace, and then United States champion Lex Luger, prior to a meeting with Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard shortly before SummerSlam 1990. Although he would tape his first matches for television shortly before Survivor Series 1990, the Thanksgiving night pay-per-view is what's accepted as the official debut of The Undertaker. There he was foisted onto an astonished audience as a mystery partner on Ted DiBiase's team. Fans watched in awe as this unblinking brute slowly stalked opponents, delivering relentless strikes and demonstrating mesmerizing agility. Although he was a chilling villain managed by the unlikable Brother Love shortly before being handed off to a more fitting ally in Paul Bearer, fans found it difficult at times to boo The Undertaker because he was simply unlike anything they'd seen before. Throughout 91, his unyielding path of destruction would only continue to unfold. It was on his 26th birthday, March 24th, 1991, when The Undertaker began his now legendary WrestleMania streak, annihilating the veteran Superfly Jimmy Snuka in a matter of minutes. His aura of invincibility was fleshed out with each ensuing victory, and shortly afterwards, Undertaker moved on to bigger stars. The Ultimate Warrior was his next high-profile nemesis, getting locked inside an airtight coffin at the end of one particular attack. When Warrior was then fired from WWE that August, Undertaker assisted Jake Roberts in gate-crashing Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth's wedding reception uninvited, violently marring the end of the ceremony. But it wouldn't take long for Undertaker to ascend to meet the promotion's very biggest stars. 1 year after his debut at the 1991 Survivor Series, Undertaker would defeat WWF champion Hulk Hogan in a match dubbed the Gravest Challenge, thanks to an assist from Ric Flair, that dastardly Ric Flair. The controversy led to a rematch 6 nights later in San Antonio, in which Hogan regained the belt, also via a contestable finish. As far as the original Survivor Series match went, more important than winning the gold for Undertaker was the crowd response he received. While Hogan was beginning to get a bit old hat in 91, and also tarnished by scandal, there was no denying that Undertaker was one of the coolest and most captivating figures in all of wrestling. In response to his enormous popularity, The Undertaker was turned babyface less than 2 months before WrestleMania 8. This was a result of him preventing Jake Roberts from trying to attack Miss Elizabeth with a steel chair. What a chivalrous good guy. Though Undertaker was still an unfathomable creature seemingly beyond humanity, it seemed he possessed something of a moral compass and was quick to rescue the damsel in distress. This led to Undertaker driving Roberts out of the WWF at the aforementioned WrestleMania, tombstoning him onto the floor outside the ring before a little anticlimactically rolling him back inside for an easy pinfall. Going forward, Undertaker essentially filled the role that Andre the Giant had helmed throughout his career, the babyface attraction that is both a wonder and a bit of an oddity at the same time. With this role, though, came a double-edged sword. Undertaker would be presented as virtually unbeatable, but his list of opponents was little more than a collection of limited monsters and giants. Kamala, Giant Gonzalez, Mr. Hughes, and others would fill Undertaker's match portfolio throughout 92 and 93. They kept the Phenom strong, but it was outside of the main event. However, his chance of winning a second world title would come along very soon. On January 22nd, 1994 at the Royal Rumble, The Undertaker died, sort of. In his attempt to defeat WWF champion Yokozuna in a casket match, Undertaker was attacked by a ludicrous number of heels, about 10 or 12 heels. His urn was then unsealed, releasing the source of his apparent omnipotence. After delivering some sort of strange post-mortem monologue on the Titantron before ascending up to heaven or something, Mark Calloway would then vanish for 7 months, being replaced by a Ted DiBiase-endorsed imposter, fake Undertaker, played by primetime Brian Lee. At SummerSlam 94, the real Undertaker re-emerged, with purple replacing the grey in his colour scheme. How fancy. There, he dispatched the Underfaker once and for all. Upon his return, Undertaker would gain revenge on Yokozuna at Survivor Series, before spending most of 1995 battling the $1 Million Corporation, beating IRS, King Kong Bundy, and Kama at 3 different pay-per-views. He would also gain revenge on King Mabel, who had legitimately broken Undertaker's eye socket with an errant blow by conquering him in a casket match to close out 1995. From there, Undertaker returned to the main event scene, turning his attention to Diesel after Kevin Nash screwed him over in a WWF title match against Bret Hart at the '96 Royal Rumble. Diesel would then become the streak's 5th victim at WrestleMania 12. By this point, it's fair to say that Undertaker hadn't really gotten to show what he could do inside the ring as a versatile performer, but his next foe would get the very best work out of him so far, and arguably ever. That man was Mick Foley. Once Cactus Jack donned the leather mask of Mankind, the two remorseless maulers set about destroying each other as much as the sets around them, as boiler room brawls and buried alive matches helped usher in a more chaotic WWF. Also ushered in were slight costume changes for The Undertaker, who began to appear a little more medieval goth than Old West mortician. That feud with Mankind gave Undertaker a handful of acclaim-worthy performances, while also costing him Paul Bearer, who had turned on him in order to align with Mankind at SummerSlam 96. This more human and likeable Undertaker would end up main eventing WrestleMania 13 in slightly roundabout fashion. That's right, Austin and Hart were on the undercard. What happened there? However, it was good news for Taker, who would capture his 2nd world championship in a victory over Psycho Sid. His reign would last over 4 months, and to be fair, it didn't really represent the most memorable of points in Undertaker's career. Despite being champion, usually the dead man would play second fiddle to Steve Austin's hell-raising, Bret Hart's pro-Canadian rhetoric, or Shawn Michaels' unapologetic edginess. It was in a feud with HBK after dropping the belt to Bret Hart that Undertaker helped usher in Hell in a Cell matches, bloodying Michaels into oblivion in one of WWE's greatest and most fondly remembered matches of all time. And that match would also spawn a huge part of Undertaker's legacy, his evil brother Kane. Glenn Jacobs stormed the cell in the closing minutes of the match, confronting the disbelieving brother who had assumed that Kane had perished years earlier. The conflict between the half-siblings would be revisited many times over the coming years, but it was at its most compelling in early '98, when Undertaker survived a fiery attempt on his life at the Royal Rumble before finally accepting Kane's challenge. Undertaker would barely vanquish him at WrestleMania 14 before defeating Kane in the first ever Inferno match the following month. And if human barbecue wasn't enough murderous mayhem, Undertaker would top it all at the 1998 King of the Ring when he sent Mankind falling to his near death from Hell in a Cell not once, but twice. Nobody will ever forget Mick Foley's plummeted brushes with death, nor his painful landings on thumbtacks as Undertaker's resolute swathe of destruction continued unchallenged. He would meet Steve Austin for WWF Gold at SummerSlam 98, the culmination of the highway to hell, only to fall just short. By this period, Undertaker actually began aligning himself more closely with Kane while embracing the villainous path that he'd once walked. But what could WWF do to really turn Undertaker fully heel? Well, enter the Ministry of Darkness. In this period, The Undertaker was presented as a looming demonic presence, the unquestioned leader of a cult-like faction that participated in sacrificial rites, mock crucifixions, abductions, and other rituals with an occult motif. Strangely, the Ministry would then soon merge with a Shane McMahon-led corporation, giving us the Corporate Ministry. Remember that very weird remix theme tune? After the group met with a fairly fast end, spoilers, it was Vince McMahon all along, Undertaker partnered with The Big Show, slowly shedding his gothic accessories and underworld aura in favour of playing something a bit closer to his real-life persona. Despite coming in as an undead zombie, we were starting to see shades of Mark Calloway, the Texas-bred biker who doesn't need graveyard terror in order to intimidate his opponents. However, Undertaker's true introduction as the American badass came at Judgment Day 2000, storming the ring on 2 wheels of fury, Kid Rock blaring through the arena. It was more badass at the time. This was in 2000, don't worry about it. For the next year and a half, The Undertaker spoke threateningly about what he would do to the intruders upon his yard, most of which would entail a blood-soaked beating and an emphatic last ride powerbomb, his new finisher. Later, as Kid Rock gave way to Limp Bizkit, Undertaker continued to remain relevant, feuding with Triple H and Steve Austin in high-profile matches, while also standing alongside Kane in perhaps the strongest incarnation of the Brothers of Destruction. But then, in an unexpected twist at the end of 2001, The Undertaker turned heel once again, humiliating Jim Ross at the altar of Vince McMahon without any reason or provocation. This turn, along with a haircut, brought out an emotionless bully side of The Undertaker. It was a sort of combination of biker Taker at his most overpowering with the frigid inhumanity of the original 1990 Undertaker, except without the zombie powers and brother love and all that sort of thing. During this time, he would also hold a rare singles title that wasn't a top belt, the Hardcore Championship, while also famously brutalizing Maven after a stunning Royal Rumble elimination in 2002. Well done for winning Tough Enough, Maven. Are you okay? In March of 2002, the streak would reach double digits as The Undertaker punished Ric Flair in a bloody street fight at WrestleMania 18 before finishing off the Nature Boy with the tombstone that was actually rarely seen during this time. Undertaker would then set his sights back on the world title shortly thereafter and became the first man to win the belt after WWE got the F out in May 2002. Coincidentally, he would vanquish the man he'd beaten for the gold more than a decade earlier, Hulk Hogan, with the best chokeslam of all time. Undertaker would become a de facto babyface shortly thereafter, warring with the likes of Brock Lesnar and even Vince McMahon before the next major change in his career. A twisted Kane helped bury his brother alive at the 2003 Survivor Series, a moment that would mark the end of Biker Taker as we knew him. In the months after, Kane would be haunted by warning signs that indicated that an older version of The Undertaker was coming after him. WrestleMania 20 inside Madison Square Garden was the day that the dead walked once again, as Paul Bearer and a horde of druids heralded Undertaker's return to the dark side. Revenge over Kane was had, and the hellish Phenom was back in the game, conjuring up old memories as he slayed fearful giants one after another. Undertaker would also avoid having his legend killed by Randy Orton throughout a sometimes awesome, sometimes hokey 2005 feud. But this Phenom 2.0, even hovering around his 40th birthday, was no nostalgia act. He would challenge for world titles in matches that showcased his often underrated wrestling ability. He fell short against Kurt Angle in a real thriller at the 2006 No Way Out pay-per-view, but would make good on later WrestleMania opportunities, defeating Batista and Edge at WrestleMania 23 and 24 respectively. In doing so, he was also amassing more world championships to his impressive collection. Shortly thereafter, Undertaker's appearances began to grow a little bit rarer, and as the decade of the 2000s came to a close, the part-time Undertaker began to take over. The Undertaker that began making minimal appearances was no less anticipated, nor would his higher level performances be diminishing anytime soon. Make no mistake about it, the dead man could still go. This was made apparent at WrestleMania 25 in his native Houston, Texas, when the 44-year-old dead man outlasted fellow Texan Shawn Michaels in an epic half-hour struggle that earned global acclaim. And again is also considered one of the greatest matches in WWE history. Remember before when I said that Mankind may have been Undertaker's greatest opponent ever? HBK might have a word or two to say about that. 1 year later, after ending his 7th and final world title reign, Undertaker beat Michaels in a streak versus career match at WrestleMania 26 that just about equaled its predecessor in terms of quality. In doing so, Undertaker improved to a staggering 18-0 at WrestleMania, while Michaels bid wrestling a tearful farewell. These matches with Shawn established what would essentially become a WrestleMania tradition, the streak as a title worth challenging for in itself. Where one clickster failed after betting the farm, another would give it a go as Triple H came within an eyelash of knocking Undertaker off at WrestleMania 27, although he would be more decisively trounced a year later inside Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania 28, the end of an era. In 2013, an iconoclastic CM Punk stepped up to the plate, only to have his arrogance and disrespect crushed in yet another Undertaker show stealer at WrestleMania. And by now, the streak had blossomed to 21-0. And then, we all know what comes next. It happened. On April 6, 2014, before 75,000 stunned fans inside the Superdome, The Undertaker's streak was shattered by the third F5 of Brock Lesnar. To this day, and for years to follow, the moment of paralyzing realization will continue to be felt residually from the gallery of stunned fans. Everything made this moment so memorable and so heartbreaking, from Paul Heyman's incredulous freakout to the 21-1 graphic on the Jumbotron. It seemed as though this really was the end of The Undertaker, having fought for 23 plus years to protect that smudgeless sheen of his entire existence, only to finally slip against the beast incarnate. The applause and the chants of "Thank you, Taker" were fully genuine, a deserved ovation for one of WWE's all-time greats, however bittersweet the moment as a whole. But despite that, Undertaker would still press on, still showing his face on WrestleMania Sunday year after year, seemingly forever in perpetuity as a Mania attraction. Bray Wyatt bit the dust at Mania 31, and Shane McMahon's efforts were for naught at 32, and he jumped off the cell, and it was really scary. In between, after warring once more with Lesnar inside a brutal Hell in a Cell clash, Undertaker commemorated 25 years in WWE with a match at the 2015 Survivor Series, teaming with Kane to polish off the Wyatt family. Since then, Undertaker lost a faux curtain call to Roman Reigns at Mania 33 before popping up once more at 34 to polish off John Cena in, let's be honest, a glorified squash match. It was a glorified squash match, but it was really exciting at the same time, wasn't it? Now in his mid-50s, The Undertaker truly has nothing more to prove, though that statement has been true for well over a decade in all fairness. His legacy in WWE is an incomparable one. His status as one of the all-time greats, unassailable. Through the many changes that WWE has undergone in the past 3 decades, from ever-changing rosters to shifts in content and tone, there was Mark Calaway, WWE's Dark Knight, throughout the thick and thin of it all. His career in professional wrestling could never be duplicated, in large part because no other man could have done justice to a role like The Undertaker. So that is the captivating career of The Undertaker. Thank you very much for listening, and be sure to check out for more installments of this series in the near future. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to at Jack the Jobber. You can follow all of us at Cultaholic, and check out our Patreon as well, patreon.com/Cultaholic. And never forget, of course, if you haven't done so already, to hit subscribe and to join us.